that they can run a business. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. It never used to be like that. An entrepreneur used to just be someone that didn't have a job or couldn't find a job. Today, we're going to be talking about some fantastic opportunities if you're a contractor. I'm also going to be running through how to start and run a business that is scalable, sustainable, repeatable, and franchisable. I have a very special guest in store for everybody, so make sure that you stick around. Click the link below to find out about our free monthly business mastery workshops that will show you how to make your business data-driven, scalable, sustainable, repeatable, and franchisable. Now, you might not know it by looking at me, but I've been in business for over 30 years. I've done finance. I was in the music industry for a while, and I have a lot of information. What I have found is that a lot of people start or run a business and they're doing it the completely wrong way. That's why I wrote my book, Business Mastery for Startups and Side Hustlers. The way that I love to explain it is that a lot of people will go out and do the sexy stuff. So they'll go out and get the logo, or they'll go out and get the website, but they don't have the foundational things. It's just like people who decide that they're going to be contractors, and they don't know if they should transition into contracting or if they should just go and get a full-time job. So let me just introduce you to Paul Taylor, who is my special guest this evening, just that he can just say hello, and then I'll do my presentation, and then Paul will be talking about contracting.
Sorry. At the moment.
Sorry, I had you on mute.
Oh,
hey,
sorry
Paul,
about that.
How are you?
I'm very well. Sorry about that, Anthony. I probably clicked the button. You took me off of mute, and I put myself on mute at the same time.
Yeah,
but anyway, thanks for the kind introduction, and I look forward to catching up with you in about a couple of moments.
Okay, we'll see you then. So, as I said, I wrote a book called Business Mastery for Startups and Side Hustlers. It's the equivalent of giving you every key thing that you need to start and run a business in one book. What I mean by that is, if you go out and get an amazing logo, but you don't have the right mindset, it's useless. If you go out and have a great website, but you don't know how to sell or follow up, useless. So what I do is I give you all of the key fundamentals to get up and running quickly. We do have a course, and it is hugely beneficial to anybody that's -6 months to 12 months in business. My name is Anthony Lindsay. As I said, I've worked for some of the top financial institutions, and I've also worked in the music industry. I help startups and side hustlers make their first 100,000 by building a data-driven business. It's important that I stress I help people make their first 100,000, because quite often people that are up and running, even if they're doing it wrong, they're so heavily invested in what they're doing, they don't want to hear ways that they could enhance. I often say the tools that I'm giving you, if you're already successful, are not instead of, they're in addition to. Today we'll be going through mindsets, how to build and hone a business plan, how to increase the site traffic, marketing, and CRM, which is customer relationship management. If you'd like to download the book, here is the QR code. We do have some free copies available. So if you go and we still have those free copies available, you'll be able to get a free copy of the book. Let's talk about mindsets. Have you ever heard someone say, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? So what would you do if you knew that you could not fail? It's all about mindsets. So mindsets are you thinking you can do something and you being right about that, or you thinking that you cannot do something and you being right. You have to have the right mindset when you are starting and running a business. And the reason why that's important is because, as I said, if you don't think that you can be successful at what you're doing, you probably won't be successful at what you're doing. So part of the course and part of what we go through is how to get your thinking right, how to be able to take positive feedback from people when they're giving you feedback to help make your business better. Also, not to have an emotionally run business. Quite often people have a business and they're passionate about it, and they're passionate about it to the extent that they don't want to hear feedback, and they don't want to hear when people are giving them information that could help them be better at what they do. So your mindset is the ability to be resilient when you're given feedback, and it's also the ability to be positive and to believe in yourself and to be able to go through all of the changes and all of the adversity that you will face as a business owner. So your mindset is a key thing, and making sure that you have the resilience is also very important. Have you ever heard them say people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan? This is one of the very key parts of running a business. Have a plan. And the plan cannot just be in your head. You have to have a written plan. Having a business plan is a way of holding yourself accountable to a goal. Because if you've written it down, probably in that writing process, you've asked yourself some key questions. But even if you haven't, because it's something that is tangible, when you don't achieve a goal, you can't say that that was never your goal because you have written it down. We use a platform called LivePlan to help people get up and running with their business. And LivePlan enables them to make the business plan, but break it down into smaller parts. So before you can sell, you have to understand your business and you have to have a business plan. And LivePlan will help you build your business in a way that is thought through, in a way that is pragmatic, and in a way that you're accountable to yourself. So if you're starting a business, it's vital that you have a business plan. If you have a business plan and you haven't reviewed it in more than a year, then you need to review your business plan. A lot of people, as I said, will get so caught up in the logo. So you often get these things from friends and family members where they're like, here are 3 versions of a logo. Which one do you think is best? I really don't care what your logo looks like, okay? Because if you don't have the fundamentals of a business in place, all you have is a logo, you don't have a business. There's lots of places that you can go and get a logo. And my wife, for example, is a graphic designer. And my wife does amazing logos. But I don't recommend that everybody goes to a branding expert for their logo, because there are platforms where you can get it for little or nothing. So there's a platform called Fiverr where you can go on there. But the thing to keep in mind is the result will only be as good as your instructions or your input. So understand what you're looking to do. But also understand, if you do get one of those less expensive logos, you're probably working with someone that can afford to do it for little or nothing. So you will get what you pay, to the extent that there was a car company, or there is a car company in the US called Chevy. So Chevrolet. And they had a car that they had released called the Chevy Nova. The Chevy Nova. And for those of you Spanish speaking people, you know that Nova is no go. So for some reason, this particular car did not sell well in Spanish speaking countries. Now, if you've just gone on Fiverr or on Upwork to get your logo, the person designing your logo is not going to look into those things. They're not going to look at colors and shapes and how they can be perceived. They're just probably going to give you something that looks good. Another key to running a business successfully is being persistent and consistent. Every single January on LinkedIn, people jump in and start saying, I'm going to start posting. That's one of my New Year's resolutions. It doesn't just happen on LinkedIn, but that's one of the key places. People are like, I'm going to start posting. They post all of January, post most of February. By March, they start to disappear. If you're running a business, you must be persistent and consistent. It's not going to happen overnight, so you should be prepared for the long haul. 80% of your output will come from 20% of your work. So you want to understand what that 20% is. You want to reiterate and refine and iterate that 20% to make sure that the 80% that you're getting out is in line with what you're actually trying to achieve. Now, I major a lot on the 4 pillars, and that's being scalable, sustainable, repeatable, and franchisable. So, scalable. That means if you were to, let's just say, get a slot on the BBC or on NBC or on some very big platform, would you be able to handle the business that might come from that? So are you scalable? Can you scale up quickly? Are you able to go from 0 to 100 and still deliver the same level of service quickly? Is it sustainable? So it may be that you're making a product, so you're a baker, and you get a bunch of orders, and that means you have to work long hours for a week, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks. How sustainable is that? At what point will it have an impact on your family, on your health? At what point will you just say, this is too much? So, is it sustainable? Is it repeatable? Once you have the business up and running, could you do it again? Do you have written processes that are that you can duplicate? I almost said duplicatable. I'm not sure if that's a word. But do you have processes in place that you can duplicate? So that's what I mean by repeatable. It may not even be duplicating the same business. It may be duplicating or starting a new business, but could you duplicate that success? Do you have systems in place? And franchisable. What I mean by that is, are your processes good enough that somebody would buy that structure, buy those processes? So scalable, sustainable, repeatable, and franchisable, those are the key things. Understand who your ideal client is. So you want to have what's called a customer avatar. So your customer avatar is a summary of your best type of customer. So that's the type of customer who values what you do. It's a customer who will pay for your product or service. It's a customer who will also refer other like-minded people to your business, and you don't have to resell yourself, because at that point, people have already bought into you because they have been referred by someone else. Make sure you stalk the people that are in the areas that you want to be in. So if you have an influencer in your area, in the area of business that you're doing, you want to find a way of finding out who is listening to them, that you can reach those people. But this evening, we are here to talk about how to start and run a business, but also we have Paul here that we can talk about contracting and some other things. He'll be doing a presentation, but we have to understand that people will do things for one of three reasons. We do things either for health reasons, for wealth reasons, or for relationship. Sometimes it's a combination of two of those things, or maybe three of those things. However, in most cases, what it's going to be is at least one of those things. So, Paul, are you still with us? Okay, I have you on mute again. Hey, Paul, how are you?
I'm not too bad. I'm still very good, thank you.
Okay, good. So Paul is a consultant with over 30 years, and you wouldn't know it by looking at him either, with over 30 years experience across the financial services industry, oil and gas, charities, technology, education, and professional body industries. One of the things that appealed to me and really made me want to have Paul on in this conversation is his wealth of knowledge, his depth of knowledge, and the fact that there's some things in there that I'm quite interested in too. So I'm going to hand over to Paul, and Paul will take us for a few minutes, and I appreciate you being here, Paul.
That's great. Thank you very much. Yes, so hopefully you can see the slide pack. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger on my screen so I can see it. I'm going to run through a few slides. A little bit about me. In fact, Anthony actually described me much better than I described myself. If anything, Anthony, I might employ you as my rep going forward. But about me, I've been around many years. Anthony was far too kind when he said 30 years. He's actually nearer 35 years now, but still got my young looks. I've worked at a number of different industries, as you can see there: financial services, technology, education. I've also been a consultant, program manager as well, and I've, again, as you can see now, I've been an author, speaker, worked at Open University, as many other things. But all of this work actually started from me becoming a contractor about 18 years ago. And what this allowed me to do, as well as doing contract freelance type work, it also allowed me to expand into other areas. But I'll come to that in a second. So basically, the way I want to sort of talk you through my thinking here is almost like five main steps. The first one is don't run before you can walk, which is a polite way of saying think about what you're doing before you go contracting. It's not an easy step. Then the second one is why do people want to work for themselves? Again, that's more around the motivations. One thing I found why I actually adore working contracting, I recommend it 1,000%. It's not for everyone. Some people feel uncomfortable with the challenges of contracting, but again, I'll run through that in a second. So therefore, item 3, you just come to the point is, well, you decided that you want to do contracting or work for yourself or be self-employed. Now you need to make the jump. What do you need to do to move from the permanent life to the contract life? Once you've done that, you need to work for yourself going forward. There's lots and lots of stuff you need to do, tax returns, keep selling yourself, keep skilling yourself. And that moves on to number 5, where there's probably like a few points on my personal issues that I encountered and how I got around them, hopefully to share a little bit of wisdom. And at the end, we'll just do a quick wrap up. So looking at the first item, don't run before you can walk. I think the key point is a lot of people see contracting freelance as quite glamorous and people can jump into quickly. The lesson I learned and the lesson I'd like to pass on is make sure you've got some grounding in your career that you've done before. So if you're going to be a contractor, say a computer programmer, make sure you've actually programmed computers before, make sure you've done some work in a bigger organization. And therefore that will actually give you a lot more sort of like I call it sort of like life experience and some real experience as well. And it allows you to, as part of this working for another organisation, you can learn from them, you can see how organisations operate, and you get some pragmatic experience. Because it's very easy to come up with glamorous CVs and logos, as Anthony mentioned. I think that's quite an interesting point. But basically, when you're working for yourself, you have to have a lot of substance under yourselves, otherwise people will see through it quite quickly. And the other point is to mention is making the jump is quite a big psychological step as well. You've got to think about it yourself. So do a bit of reading and what you need to do. And that can be anything from reading books, and effectively this slide pack's based on my book on how to go contracting. Look at social media, attend presentations, there's thousands of networking events, there's webinars, there's YouTube videos. So try and do some groundwork before you can actually think about making the contracting step. Because the key point is, and I always stress this when I do these presentations, is that contract is not for everyone. And some people prefer the permanent lifestyle and the stability it brings. Other people enjoy the well, I'd say excitement, but I find it exciting, but the excitement that contracting actually brings. And so we've done that first item, so don't run before you can walk, which is basically get a good sounding and some decent knowledge on what you want to do. And then the key point there is, and this is probably one of the most important points that's covered in the book and obviously on the slides, is why do people actually want to go contracting? And there's probably about 6 or 7 main reasons. The first one, personally, I find it very exciting. I enjoy the variety. I enjoy working with different people, doing presentations. But again, some people don't find that exciting. They probably find that quite unsettling. So again, have a serious think about that point. You own your own destiny. You have much more control over what you can do. For example, if you're in a permanent job and you're unhappy there, you've got to find another job, etc. If you're contracting or freelancing, you have much easier. You can leave jobs a lot easier, and you can move around much easier, which gives you far more ownership over your destiny. You do have increased earning power. Obviously, the downside to that, you have to pay for everything yourself, like sick leave, pensions, an accountant, and all that sort of stuff. But you can actually earn a lot more money by working for yourself, because ultimately, every piece of money you earn is yours. As I mentioned earlier, slightly varied onto that, there's a lot of greater variety and interest of work. As I mentioned earlier, I started off as a contract project manager 18 years ago now, just at the end of 2007. And since then, I've worked as a non-executive director. I've been a board advisor. I've written a number of books. I'm a constant speaker. So it allows you to have much more variety and you get much more breadth of work, where if you're a permanent member of staff, you may not always get the flexibility to do that. The other one is, I put down flexibility, but I think it is, and I think one of the points Anthony mentioned about health, and that's it's a big thing actually nowadays, is mental health and the work-life balance. It allows you with contracting to have a much better work-life balance. There is a sort of like slight contradiction there because you tend to work longer hours, but the good thing about it is you can have natural breaks and you have much more flexibility to step in and step out of work. Holidays. This is always a slight paradox as well, and it really depends on individuals. Some people prefer their holidays, they're 2 weeks a year and some time off for Christmas. Contracting work, you don't tend to get that because you're there to do a piece of work. If you're doing a project manager or you're doing a bit of research, you're there for the period. But your holidays can actually almost like be gaps between contracts, which actually is quite nice, actually, especially at this time of the year. And this is probably the main reason I moved, to be honest with you, was no more office politics. As a freelancer, a contractor, self-employed, you're very much brought in to do a piece of work. If you do the piece of work, then you move on. You have no real need to try and get promoted. You have no inter-office politics. And one of the reasons I went contracting, I was working at the time for a very large American bank, and the corporate politics, to be honest with you, were actually quite crippling. And I decided I just couldn't do it anymore. And I decided by going into contracting, I basically bypassed the whole thing. So we've sort of done a piece of work there. We've sort of talked about don't run before you can walk, i.e. think about it before you go in. The second point now is number 2 we just covered there, is to go through the motivations to make sure you're jumping it into the right reason. But now is let's actually work out, I've made a decision, I'm going to go contracting. What do I do now to become self-employed contractor? First thing is, and again this points on to the point Anthony you were mentioned earlier, is understand what you're branding yourself as. Who are you? What is your unique selling point? Originally when I started off, I was a project manager in financial services. It was as simple as that. Over the years I've evolved my brand to be a consultant and a non-exec director and a chair and an advisor. But it's very key to have a very, very clear point to how you sell yourself. So when you do speak to clients or you send out brochures or CVs, you have a nice little branding at the top that says who you are, very clear, very sharp. And although obviously it does change over time. Other thing is to see what your markets or your competitors are doing. Being a freelancer is actually sort of strange because even though your competitors are competitors, they're often your colleagues and friends. So if you study other contractors, study what they're doing, speak to them, and people can give you lots of insights into how they became a contractor. As I mentioned before, understand what is your idea is also understanding your brand as well. So those 2 points are very linked, so apologies for jumping ahead. Build a plan. I think when I went contracting, I sort of decided around about June time I was going to go contracting. And so I went through, spoke to a number of people, build a plan to ensure that I was a contractor by the end of August, and I actually I got my first piece of work actually in the first week of September. So build a plan of all the activities you need to do, write a CV, if you need a website, put a website in, if you need to start contacting people with work, and have some sort of structure around it. Otherwise you would just meander and wander and nothing will happen, and you get very demotivated and rather stressed by the whole thing. The other side is your personal side, and basically what happens if it all goes wrong. So what this basically means is, if you go out freelancing, you very much you're there to earn the money. So if you're not working, you're not earning. So therefore, that can actually be quite stressful. So what I do recommend with people is build, before you actually make the jump to becoming self-employed, is to build some sort of a cash nest egg, I think is the phrase. So basically, if you struggle to get to work or the jobs don't work out, you have some sort of fallback in place. And basically what I did, and to be honest with you, I made sure I had about 4 months' money in a bank account, high interest, because in those days in 2007, interest rates were actually generally okay on that. So I knew if anything went wrong, I had about 4 and a bit months time to sort it out. which is actually gives you an amazing amount of peace of mind. So that's what we've done now. So again, just to sort of like recap, we've make sure you've done some prep work. Don't run before you can walk. Two is understand your motivation. So again, you understand why you're doing it. What's the real reason? Again, my main reason I actually did it was to avoid office politics and work-life balance. Making the jump to become self-employed, obviously, make sure you've got a plan and preparation. And the key point there is make sure you've got a fallback plan if things don't happen or things don't get delayed or other things happen. And that should be good. And if you've done all that, you're in a good position to make the jump. But now, looking at item 4, is you've actually made the jump and you're working for yourself. What do you need to do to maintain the business? Make sure you're sustainable and maintain what you're doing. The first one is manage your cash flow very closely. The amount of people I know I've worked with, contractors, and any small businesses, and it's probably a general problem, they've got months and months of invoices outstanding. So I do, on a regular basis, I would say at least every 2 weeks, I'll go through all the invoices I've got outstanding and then send gentle reminders to people to say, this invoice is late, or are you okay to pay next week per terms? So really don't be afraid to chase down money. If you've done the work and they've signed off the work, then the money's yours. So please don't be afraid, although I appreciate it's quite uncomfortable. Keep selling yourself or selling your business. And this is often, again, a lot of people struggle with this, particularly if you're highly introverted like myself. And this basically means what you need to do is keep promoting yourself, putting yourself out there. I do a number of activities. Obviously, I have a number of clients I've used previously, so I'm always in contact with them. I speak probably 9 or 10 events a year of various sizes. So that's good for promotion. I do a regular blog, which is I think how I met Anthony actually. I think he ended up on one of my mailing lists. So I email that blog every day to keep people's going. I do a lot of thought leadership work. I do a little bit of cold mailing to prospects, but I tend to try and do it a word of mouth. I fancy working at this place here. I know somebody who knows somebody. Can they introduce me? But that has to be an ongoing process. It is quite tiring and it can be quite demotivating because of the tiredness. And a lot of people are quite uncomfortable selling themselves, and I include myself in it. But you have to keep this general perception you're looking for work out there. The key thing is to focus on the important items, not the things that you're interested in. And again, Anthony, this comes back to what you mentioned earlier, focusing on the sexy things, or not focusing on the sexy things, as you mentioned. Is the most important thing there is don't worry about having a super duper great logo. No one really remembers your logo, especially as a freelancer. They just remember you. So yeah, so just focus on, as I mentioned before, selling your business, managing your cash and stuff like that, which is the key important items. Know your clients, customers, and manage their expectations. So when you are working for yourself and you've got a client, you will find you'll probably group your clients into 3 groups. Sets of clients you absolutely love the working with and you'll quite happily work with them on and off until the day you retire. Clients in the middle you think are okay, they're not that great, but I'll enjoy working with them. And there's a third set of clients you think, I'm not really that keen going back there for various reasons. So the key thing is when you work with a client, you must basically walk the walk. I think it's the phrase our American colleagues will call it. If you're going to deliver a project, make sure you deliver it on time. If you're going to do a bit of research, make sure you get it on time. Make sure you always over-deliver, because basically you want that client to say, Anthony, Paul, John, Freddie, you did a great job. Shame you're going, but we'll get back to you if we need you again. You want them coming to chase you for work. Obtain funding. Again, this is not always appropriate for freelancers, but make sure you do have any funding lines if you need it. So, if you've got set yourself up as a freelancer and you don't have a massive amount of money, can you speak to the bank to maybe get an overdraft, get a credit card, stuff like that? The last thing you want to do is end up having to close down your website or something along those lines because you can't pay the £10 a month fee. But again, it all comes down to that very much links to the very top item, which is manage your money. Managing people. As a freelancer, you're probably unlikely to manage anybody yourself unless you're given a sort of like a remit to run a project. What I've found over the years is I tend to, as a freelancer, I will tend to do everything myself. I do have an accountant and stuff like that, but I tend to do it myself. And the last one here is managing suppliers. So again, as a freelancer, you will outsource or you will use suppliers for certain stuff like marketing materials. Maybe I use some agencies to help search for non-exec director work. The website. I've also got an accountant and people like that to make sure you're on top of what they're doing as well. Because the last thing you want to do is, particularly like for an accountant, to make sure they've done your tax return wrong or something along those lines, and you get a nasty letter. But so there's recap is obviously you manage your cash, keep selling yourself, focus on the important things, which aren't always the most pleasant things. Over deliver, always over manage your expectations, your clients. It means working very late in the evening. Always do it. Manage your money, as I mentioned earlier. Manage any people you have to look after, and also look after suppliers to ensure there's no embarrassment. Other things is resources may also need to be managed as well. Again, the key thing there is, I mean, obviously I tend to use, I live in just east of London, so I tend to pop into London every so often, so I don't really have much resources. But I know I have friends who are contractors and they do driving, they drive everywhere. They have buildings, they have offices, Regis office type things, and they need to ensure, you can't say to a client, I'm going to have to skip work today because I can't get my car to start. So all those sort of little things like that, make sure you're proactive over them. If you've got a car or a vehicle, make sure it's serviced. If you've got technology, make sure your internet's fully, you're not going to lose internet connectivity. Make sure everything you want to use is in tip-top order, so you don't have that embarrassing thing to a client and say, I can't do any work today because of my Wi-Fi, I forgot to pay my BT bill. Legal protection. Again, this is another one that's often forgotten, and a number of people I've worked with, whether they're contractors or even small business, who've actually been caught out badly because of there being legal protection. So if you've got any, you're writing a book, as I've written a number, I know Anthony's written another, make sure you've got copyright on it so that people don't steal your ideas. I worked with a training firm once who was selling their training to a large firm. The large firm pulled out, and 2 months later they found the large firm had copied virtually everything they'd done, but they didn't have any legal protection over it. So it all got very nasty. If you're writing a piece of software, make sure you've got IP protection over it. Again, I work for an internet startup, and we've got a machine learning engine to try and mark exam papers. One of the things we've got on that is to make sure all our intellectual software we've developed, or the machine learning algorithms, are protected. So it's very important to do that. Advertising. Again, it comes back to a slight, as you mentioned earlier, keep selling yourself. Whether you're advertising implies you're putting something in a newspaper or having something on the television, but realistically, advertising these days is far more subtle. So it'll be things like networking, blogs, thought leadership, speaking, writing, teaching at universities. So again, just you've got to keep promoting yourself. Don't matter how tiring and hard work it is. Network and trade bodies. Another thing, which I sort of mentioned it earlier with networking, but trade bodies is actually a very good way to pick up work. I'm a member of a number of trade bodies, primarily financial services and technology, and I'm an active member of those, often attending events, whether they're in-person events or what do you call it, electronic webinar type events, I can't remember the word. So I spend a lot of time on that, and it's good to build up networks and contacts and get visibility, because trade bodies are, as well as there to support the industry, they're very helpful to get connections as well. The next one there is do not be afraid to ask for help or assistance. Again, one of my roles is I've mentored about 30 to 40 people over the last 8 or 9 years, from anything from trying to get a job in the UK to setting up a firm. Don't be afraid to ask people for assistance, especially if there's things like trade bodies. There's always like forums and there's always bulletin boards. People are actually quite willing to help, actually. You'd be quite surprised in my experience. People ask horrible questions. You think no one really cares. and then before you know it, you've got about 20 answers. So never be afraid to ask. And don't forget the administration overheads of running your business. Again, I worked for a director for a firm many years ago. I won't mention the name in case they're watching this. Is that their administration behind the scenes was a total chaotic mess. They weren't chasing invoices. They hadn't done their VAT return or their tax returns, and they were in quite serious trouble. And it wasn't a complex business. So again, I will book some time each week, maybe sometimes an hour, 2 hours, depending on this, just to make sure all my bank statements are up to date, make sure all my invoices have been chased, make sure all my networking and my blogging, everything's done. It's very much a mechanical type process. And look after yourself personally. It's very easy to, in this current world. Years ago, so many people had all sorts of mental problems from working long hours. So always try and take breaks and step away from the laptop occasionally. Okay, just to talk about some of the challenges I encountered. How did I brand myself? Originally, I was a project manager in financial services. Over the years, I've evolved myself to be sort of like more of a wider consultant, providing board advice and contracting advice and legal advice and change management advice primarily. Over the years, as I've got more and more experience over the years, more confidence, I've allowed my brand to evolve or expand. How did I manage my cash flow? Probably like a hawk. Anybody who knows me, I'm legendary tight. So I would each week track every penny through my bank accounts, make sure they're all tracked, and I would proactively chase down invoices that weren't paid. So very much a process to do that. Manage my work pipeline. Originally, I always used to say yes to everything, which meant I ended up working long hours and ridiculously long hours. So basically what I've done in the past now is try and manage my workload, maybe make sure I work on consultancy work maybe 4 to 5 days a week. The other work is probably a day or so a week. But it's just trying to get the balance between the two, and it depends each person's individual. And how do I cope with self-development, which is one of the biggest challenges? How do you keep your skills up to date? And there's various ways I do that. I mean, there's various training courses you can go on. Some of these are online and what have you. I attend trade events. I trade industry events. I actually write a number of textbooks and various other books. I speak with people and read white papers, blog. So there's various ways to keep your skills up to date. But the thing is, it's a very proactive type of process. It's not that common, to be honest with you. Going back many years when technology was around, that somebody could be an expert COBOL programmer, probably the best in the world, but fortunately no one wants COBOL programmers. So therefore it's very much a case of constantly thinking and looking at the market. And just to wrap up, working for yourself is superb. I highly recommend it, from my personal opinion. Hopefully my enthusiasms come over on this call, but I know some people don't like it. So as I go back to the first bit about don't run before you can jump, check yourself before you jump. And to be honest with you, I started about 18 years ago. I wish I started a lot longer than that. I mean, that's my personal view, but I am where I am now. And these are all the other points I've got down there. I won't go through all them all. I'll just pull them off the earlier slides just to give some sort of summary. Anyway, thank you for listening. As I've said, there's probably about 3 books I've written. The one's around human change, as you can see on the left, fintech in the middle. And the one that's very prominent to what we're doing now is So You Want to Go to Contracting. A lot of the ideas on this pack, slide deck, they've been lifted from that book. I hope you enjoyed the last 25 minutes. I'm going to hand you back to Anthony.
Well, actually, we're going to continue the conversation because you said so much stuff, and I hope my brother doesn't watch this. You made it sound way more exciting than my brother does. I made quite a few notes on here, so let's just have a conversation because I'd like to think that there are going to be people that are watching that are considering becoming a contractor, and a lot of the process that you spoke about is very similar to starting a business, because essentially as a contractor you are the business, and so you are getting a business up and running.
Agreed. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, the if I go back many many years, when I was coming up with the idea of the book and everything, it was actually start your own business. That's what the book was called.
Okay.
And then obviously I went through it, and I thought, and the publisher eventually said, "Yeah, you're freelancing. A lot of people don't really understand freelancing. They like the idea, but don't understand the details. But the concept is exactly the same. It's like you say, what am I going to do? What can I sell? What am I good at? Set myself up to do it, and what's the process to keep going? So yeah,
And you said something. You said that other contractors aren't
yeah,
necessarily your competitors. And
yeah,
can you just unpack that a little bit more?
yeah. Because what happens is a lot of the colleagues I work with, and I'm working for a financial services firm up in Newcastle. There's about four of us on the project team, and we're all contractors. So we're actually all working together as on a single team. I'm leading the team on it. So while these people are often vying for the same bit of work, we have to work together. So you end up with this rather strange paradox, that you are, I'm trying to get the piece of work off this other person. I know full well that I could end up working with him or her. And in fact, I've had some rather strange scenarios, and there's a chap, I won't mention his name. Over the last 20 years, he's been my customer, he's been my supplier, he's been my boss, and he's actually worked for me as well over the years. So you get this strange sort of people all moving around in a
Yeah.
sort of strange scenario with contracting. So it's not very much like, let's say, your more traditional business, like you're selling, I don't know, you're a car mechanic. Yeah, and you want all the cars to come to your garage and not the other garage, but you're all working together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it does allow you to avoid some of the office politics. I know
it does.
Marcellus, my brother, and I have a lot of conversations about this because we're built differently. I
Yeah,
he frustrates me because he loves what he does. He's a change manager, a program manager,
yeah,
and when he's talking shop, my eyes just glaze over
mm,
because he'll go in there and he gets into the detail, and a lot of the stuff that you said mirrors the conversations that he and I have. But you just made it sound a lot more interesting. Whereas me, I'm going to go in somewhere, sit
mm,
behind a desk, do what I'm doing for a long period of time, and get to know people and get
yeah.
involved in some of the politics. So it
And
is
also,
horses,
yeah, because
isn't
I
it?
work in primarily, most of my work is probably financial services, which is obviously quite a key industry to the UK, but it's also very incestuous. You do
Yes,
get the same people coming around and
yes,
round and round.
yes.
In fact, yeah, I would probably say most places I've been, actually every place I've been to, I've worked with at least six or seven people in the building who I've worked with on previous contracts.
Yeah, yeah,
Which is why and I probably didn't put it on the slides. I should have probably stressed it. The importance of having a good reputation. A
yeah,
reputation does sell, because most of the work I've done over the last 10 years, it's all been word of mouth. It's the piece of work I'm doing now for my current client. The MD I worked with about 5 years ago. It's actually more than about 10 years ago now. And my previous contracts, I've worked with people previously, so it's quite incestuous financial services.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and also the thing is, I've done it myself. I know full well how I worked with John Smith. He was really good. We need somebody to do this piece of work. I wonder if John's around. I'll give him a call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Especially with tools like LinkedIn and everything, you don't even have to remember people's numbers. You can just send them a LinkedIn message. I mean, LinkedIn that's one of its great benefits. So yeah.
So although you didn't have it as a slide, you did allude to that because you were talking about branding, and it reminds me what you're saying about
Mm.
fintech. As someone that worked in the financial industry, and even coming to the UK, I recall that I was working for a particular lender when I
Yeah.
first came to the UK, and one of our competitors was like, across the street. So we'd pay
Yeah.
off their loans, they'd pay off our
Yeah.
loans, but I always handled it in a way that I'm going to get some from them. They're going to get some
Mm.
from me. Anyway, left that company, and maybe two jobs later, I was involved in a recruitment day. So I was looking for a role, and I'm sitting waiting to be called in. And the
Yeah.
guy comes down, and he looks at me, and then he walks, and then how people do that second
Yeah.
take. And then he comes back and he's like, "You look familiar." Now, I have to give some context to this. When I first came back to the UK, I
Yeah.
had dreadlocks. So
Oh,
I had
really? Yeah.
dreadlocks for years and years and years. So when he knew me before, I had dreadlocks, and at this time I had cut my hair. But he came back and he said that I look familiar. I was like, "You look familiar too." After a
Yeah.
few questions, we determined who we were, and he said, "You know what? I always remember that out of all of the branch managers for
Mm.
competitors, you were the one that dealt with us in the best way, because quite often what would happen is they would need a redemption figure,
Mm.
and to be spiteful, the
Mm.
other people would be like, "Oh, I'm gonna put it in the mail," and
Yeah.
literally they were across the street, and they're like,
Yeah.
"I'm
No.
gonna put it in the mail," and it
That's to
would get
delay
lost.
the whole process type thing.
Yeah, and it would get
Yeah.
lost. But going back to what you're saying, it's about building that brand. It's about understanding that within this industry, you're going to cross paths on different levels, like you said. But
Yeah.
also, I mean, just one of my values in life is that you treat people well. I don't treat people based on how they treat me. I don't
Mm.
treat people well based on what I can get from them. I just believe you treat people well. And,
Yeah,
in
one of the things I
friends,
find,
it
yeah,
will
sorry,
cut
cut across
back.
here. One of the things I frustrated, you get these, I don't know if it's still on now, The Apprentice, and some of these other shows, and these,
Oh,
yeah, they're show, and I think the thing is, a lot of people sort of believe that's how business should be done. Where you've got, I wouldn't even say they're tough, they're cutthroat, they're nasty, they're horrible. You know,
yeah,
I could,
yeah,
and you think I've worked with some of the top people in financial services. They're tough guys and girls,
yeah,
and they're ruthless. They're also very nice. You
yeah,
know, they know full well that they can't be successful if their staff are terrified of them or their staff hate them. You know, you got to, yeah. And I think being nice is a one of the most underrated skills.
yeah,
There's
absolutely.
it may be long before your time. There was a guy called Rick Mal, who was a comedian in the UK back in the 80s. He's sort of like a sort of like Saturday Night Live equivalent in the UK.
Yeah,
And there's a very famous speech when he got an honorary doctorate. Slow that again. And he said, "Is what is your lessons in life?" And he was a very funny man. He got up and started chatting, and he said, "The biggest one in life is be a nice person."
yeah,
Because people remember. He actually said people will always remember the horrible people and keep away from them. He said, "Be a nice person." I think he actually said, and he sort of quoted, "All you need is love" by the Beatles, just as a
yeah,
comic effect. But the point he was trying to make was that nice, contrary to what you read, nice and friendly people do succeed, and they tend to,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. There's two quotes that come to mind with that.
mm,
People don't care how much you know until
yeah,
they know how much you care.
yeah. That's a good point.
And the
Yeah,
other one that I love, and I try to make this one of those axioms of my life,
mm,
is around the fact that people will forget what you do, people will
yeah,
forget what you say, but they'll
yeah,
always remember how you make them feel.
yeah. That's an
And
interesting,
it's
yeah.
important.
Because often people, because I've worked at, probably over the years, I've had about 30, 32, maybe 35 different assignments over the year, working at different places. And I was actually chatting to us a couple of years ago to somebody else. I think it was during lockdown actually, and we got onto the conversation. Do you miss firms? And I've said I don't think I've ever missed working at a place. I don't think I've ever missed a project, but I have missed the people.
Yeah,
Yeah, you build up some very good personal relationships with people. Even if I mean, you get like the professional relationship and you get a personal relationship, and there's some people you can work with professionally but don't always get on personally. And I've always said you never really miss the people, so you never miss the work, you never miss the place, but you do, you miss people. So
yeah. It has been an enjoyable conversation, and we'll certainly need to
mm,
pick up again at some point. But just before I let you go, or
mm,
before I move into the closing, you have three books. The
yeah.
information will be in the description, but it just feels to me like if I was someone who is considering going into contract, you're somebody that I'd want to be in touch with. Do you have any like courses or services or support that you offer people that are?
I don't do any courses, but I do one-to-one mentoring. I find that's a lot easier. I did think about many years ago having a how to go contracting course type thing, but I found it was each person so individual.
Yeah.
I found it was a lot easier to get somebody on there, have a chat, say, look, tell me, and work out a plan on a one-to-one basis.
Okay. So we'll put that information in the description. Now, as I said, quite a lot of the things that we discussed are are very relative. So the starting a business side of thing and the contracting side of things are quite similar. If you're starting a business and you want to find some inexpensive software to get your business up and running, make sure you check out AppSumo. So the thing is, you can go out and buy this piece of software or this SaaS for $9.99 a month and then $14.99 a month. But before you know it, you're spending 100, 200 pounds a month. And one of the things that Paul talked about regularly and mentioned quite a few different times is about your cash flow, managing your cash flow. So the great thing about AppSumo is you can purchase apps with a lifetime access. So you buy it once and you don't have to pay monthly. And a lot of the apps that I use, even the one that I'm using right now for the streaming, I got off AppSumo. And so AppSumo is going to give you the tools you need to run your business. The other thing is I am a ChatGPT evangelist. Big fan of ChatGPT, and don't be cheap, because if you're using ChatGPT the right way, ChatGPT is worth having 5, 6, 7 apps. So don't use the free one. If you upgrade to the paid version, it's going to work out a lot better for you. And don't be one of those people that are just like, oh, I'm not a technical person. ChatGPT is designed for anyone who can ask a question. So, yes, there is prompt engineering, and I do have a book about prompt engineering, but just get in there. Start using ChatGPT. Anyone who's not using ChatGPT or some type of AI does not want to be competitive and does not want to win. Make sure that you're using social media. I met Paul through social media. We've just had a fantastic conversation, and I hope that our relationship, our professional relationship, will continue to grow. I'm certainly going to be introducing him to my brother Marcellus, because I think that there's a lot that they have in common and there's a lot that they can do to help each other. But know which platform is going to be best for the type of thing that you're doing. So I use LinkedIn a lot as a professional. I have friends that are on TikTok that do property stuff and are hugely successful. Some people are still using Facebook. If you have something like my wife who does graphic design, Instagram might be the best thing for you. But make sure that you pick a social media platform and you start using that social media platform. Speaking of social media platforms, now people quite often look at me and they're like, Anthony, you're everywhere. You have lots of connections on LinkedIn and you're always posting. Let me let you in on a secret. I'm not always posting. I don't spend as much time on LinkedIn and on social media as it appears that I do. I use a platform called Publer. So what Publer does is it allows you to schedule your posts. Even the free version of Publer is super powerful. So you can pre-publish posts and have them come out throughout the week or throughout the month. And the other benefit of Publer is you can publish to multiple platforms. So I use Publer to publish my LinkedIn posts. I use it for my TikTok. I use it for my Facebook. So make sure you check out Publer. And if you use Publer along with ChatGPT, you're able to be even more efficient. Now, I love to write. So I'm not someone that uses ChatGPT to write my content. But what I will do is write my content in ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to proofread it, because I don't want to put something out there that diminishes my brand because it has a lot of typos. So ChatGPT will then proofread it. Sometimes I'll ask ChatGPT to add a statistic or some type of hint or tip, and then I will post that in Publer to several different platforms. I can schedule it that every Monday at 3 o'clock a post goes out. And I also use it for my YouTube. So YouTube, listen, if you're thinking about starting a blog or doing something like what I'm doing, don't overthink it, just do it. YouTube is the number two um, YouTube is the number two search engine on the planet. So, what you can use YouTube for is to have conversations like this or just share short bits of information that will be able to draw people to you and establish you as a key person of influence. If you want to market your YouTube, there's a platform called Sprizzy. This can help you get subscriptions, it can help you do your marketing as well as do your promotion. So make sure you check out Sprizzy. As we close, make sure that you have a SMART action plan. SMART is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. So make sure that you have a plan. Make sure that it's smart. We appreciate you. I'm going to bring Paul back in and we're going to close. I appreciate everybody that has been watching. So, Paul, you are off mute. In closing, I just want to thank you for your time this evening. What is one thing that you would say to someone who's considering becoming a contractor? What's the one piece of advice that you would like to give to them?
I would probably say, comes back to my first point, don't run before you can jump. Don't run before you can walk. I would say think about it in detail and prepare yourself.
Fantastic.
Yeah, be
Fantastic.
prepared. I think you said, is it plan to fail and plan to fail? I can't remember the phrase you used at the
People
beginning.
don't plan to fail, they fail to plan.
Exactly that. You say it far more articulate than me. So.
Well, thank you, Paul. And for everybody watching, if you are a business owner, if you're a startup or a side hustler, some people don't like the phrase side hustler, but if you're someone that is in business or you're an experienced business person like Paul, I'd love to have a conversation with you. You can check out the information in the link, and we will catch you